Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well. We're going to start off with chapter 10.2. We left off on this section before we did distance learning, but I just wanted to touch upon it once again because we also have to finish it. So the next class, I will finish this lesson before we can move on to 10.3. Okay, so let's refresh our memories. All right, simplifying radicals. If I give you a perfect square, such as square root of 25, we know that is equal to 5. If I give you square root of 64, you would tell me is equal to 8. Okay, so remember, we need to know our times tables in order to be able to break down the radicals. Now, what if I give you a radical that's not a perfect square? So let's do 32. Okay, you need to break up the 32 in which one of its factors is a perfect square. So the best one to use, in my opinion, is 16 and 2. So 16 times 2 gives you 32. Your next step is circle the radical that is a perfect square. So the square root of 16 gives you 4, so you pull it out, and then you're left with radical 2. So your answer is 4 radical 2. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do 300. Okay, so the square root of 300. Anytime I give you a number that's in the hundreds, you should always use square root of 100 times the 3. Okay, and what's the square root of 100? 10. So your answer is 10 radical 3. Okay, then what else did we do? We also multiplied. So when I give you two radicals, okay, let's do let's do 5. Okay, so how do I multiply radicals? I'll multiply the two numbers that are outside together. So 3 times 4 will give me 12. And then the two numbers that are inside the radical together. So 5 times 5 gives you 25. Okay, now I'm not done because I have to look at my numbers that are inside the radical and ask myself, do I have a perfect square? Am I able to break it up any further? Okay, in this case, the square root of 25 is a perfect square, so I got to pull it out to get a 5. So what do I have? I have 12 times 5, which gives you 60. So my final answer is 60. Okay, so we did simplifying one radical. We did multiplication. So how do we multiply? The two numbers that are outside together, and then the two numbers that are inside the radical together. Okay, what else did we do? And then we also, okay, were simplifying radicals that had variables inside. Okay, so remember what I told you. There's a little 2 in the radical, which means if I have variables, okay, I need to look at my power. And if my power is divisible by 2, that tells me this represents a perfect square. Okay, so look what I'm going to do first. I'm going to split up my radicals. I'm going to put radical 12 separate, my x separate, and my y separate. Okay, so then I'm going to ask myself, okay, 12, is that a perfect square? No. So let me split this up. 4 and 3. Okay, now x squared and x to the 4th, they're perfect squares. Okay, so I don't need to split that up because it's divisible by 2. All right, so this is a perfect square. So basically you're divided by 2. What's 2 divided by 2? 1. What's 4 divided by 2? Y squared. So I pull it out of the radical. And then I circle my 4 because that's a perfect square. So my final answer is 2xy squared radical 3. Now, remember, a variable represents any type of number. So if I'm pulling it out of the radical, I have to make sure that it remains positive. Okay, because I'm just dealing with real numbers. So anytime I have a power that's raised to an odd power, I have to put an absolute value there to make sure that this stays positive. Okay, this is what we left off, and I think we need a little bit more practice on this one. Okay, so I'm gonna go over 8 more problems to get you started. Then after you watch this video, you need to go to Google Classroom. I want you to complete the classwork activity. Okay, so then when we meet up in Zoom, we're going to discuss the lesson. I will answer any of the questions that you may have. Okay, so at least you know what you will have to do for your homework assignment, which will be on Edulastic. All right, so let's go over a few more problems to make sure we feel comfortable. Okay, so here's question 1, square root of 24. Okay, we know it's 2 times 12, 3 times 8, or 4 times 6. So the best one to use is 4 and 6. Okay, I will circle the 4. That's my perfect square. So my final answer is 2 radical 6. Okay, 150. Now 150, I have how many quarters when I have 150? 6, right? So it's 25 times 6. So I will circle the square root of 25, which gives me 5, and I'm left with radical 6. Okay? Let's do a multiplication one. So I will multiply 2 times 3. Then I will multiply 5 times 15, which gives me 75. All right? Now I'm not finished because inside my radical I have still perfect squares. So I need to break up the 75 into 25 times 3. Remember, you have to know your times tables in order to be able to break up the radicals. All right? So I have a 6 outside. That remains outside. But now, the square root of 25, I circled it because that's a perfect square, which I'm going to take out the 5 now from it. Okay? But I'm still going to be left with the radical 3. So now my final step is to multiply 6 times 5, which gives me 30 radical 3 for my final answer. Okay, let's do one more. So here, I'm going to multiply negative 2 times 3, and then 3 times 6. Okay, so now I'm not done because I could break up the 18 into 9 times 2. All right, you're not going to pick 6 or 3 because 6 nor the 3 are perfect squares, so that's not the correct one to use. You will use 9 times 2 because the 9 is a perfect square of 3, so you take it out and you be left with radical 2 inside. And then your final step is multiply negative 6 times 3, which gives you negative 18 radical 2. Okay? All right, so then we're going to do 4 more, which just deals with variables. Okay? All right, so here I have it, okay? I'm looking at my radical. I see that 81 is a perfect square. I see that this and this are divisible by 2, okay? So therefore, guess what? I don't need to break up anything, okay? What's the square root of 81? 9, right? This divides by 2, so 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then 4 divided by 2 will give you y squared. Because remember, when I'm multiplying my exponents, I'm really adding. So therefore, why do I want it to be divisible by 2? Because I need double of something in order to be a perfect square. Okay? So and remember, this is odd, so I got to add an absolute value symbol to make sure that that remains positive. Okay? So now let's go here. Neither one are perfect squares, so I got to break it up. I'm going to split up the 28, the x, and the y. Okay? How do I break up the 28? 4 times 7. This one, you always subtract it by 1. Okay, I'm regrouping it. I have 3 x's in total. I'm going to put 2 together and 1 by itself. That gives me 3. Okay, same thing here. I will subtract it by 1. So I'm going to regroup it. I'm going to put 4 together and 1 by itself. All right, so now I'm going to circle all of my perfect squares. Okay, and I get 2 for the 4. This one gives me 1 because I divide by 2. This will give me y squared. Again, this is odd. And then what didn't I not circle? I didn't circle a 7, didn't circle an x, and I didn't circle a y. So my final answer is this. Okay. Okay, let's do another one. All right, so I'm going to split up the 75, the x to the 4th, and the y to the 7th. All right, how do I break up the 75? 25 times 3. This is divisible by 2, so I don't need to break it up. But this one, I have to regroup it. I'm going to put 6 of the y's together and 1 by itself. Okay, so now I'm going to circle all of my perfect squares. This one is a perfect square, this one, and this one. Okay, so what's the square root of 25? 5. I'm going to divide 4 divided by 2 gives you x squared. Okay, 6 divided by 2, y to the 3rd. Now remember, for variables, if you're left with an odd power, you have to put your absolute value to make sure that it stays positive. All right, and now I'm going to just write everything that I did not circle. So I didn't circle a 3, that remains inside the radical, and I didn't circle a y, so it remains a y inside as well. Okay, here's the final one. I have 200, so I'm going to break this up into 100 times 2. This one, I will regroup it into x to the 8th, x to the 1st, and the y, I will also regroup it y to the 6th and y to the 1st. Okay, remember, if it's not divisible by 2, you just subtract it by 1. That's how you're going to regroup it. All right, so circle this one, and this one. All right, so what's the square root of 100? 10. X to the 8th, I have a double of what? Divide it, and you get that I have a double of x to the 4th, because x to the 4th times x to the 4th will give me x to the 8th, and that represents a perfect square of x to the 4th, because you have double of that. Okay, so 6 divided by 2 gives you to the 3rd. All right, again, this is odd, so I have to put absolute value, and then I'm going to write everything that I didn't circle. So I didn't circle a 2, an x, or a y. So here's my final answer. Okay, so again, you could re-watch this tutorial video, okay, or write notes, and then use your notes as a guide to complete the classwork and your homework assignment. Okay.